What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the video. In this video, I'm going to try to answer the question of what is humanity's most fundamental motivation? I just recently got into a discussion about this topic with a friend of mine, and so I wanted to try to think through some of the arguments in this video. First, we have to note a few things about motivation, why we have them, and what they are exactly. At any given moment around you, there's almost infinitely more information than you can contend with. In order for you to see and act and perceive the world, you have to organize this information. And the process of organizing this information is associated with value. So you have to deem some information as relevant or valuable, and then you have to deem other information as irrelevant. As you are going through organizing this information so that way you can even see the world and deal with your environment, you are inhabiting what can be called a value hierarchy, a framework of values that has something at the top and many, many other values at the bottom. You can also think of it as a priority list where when there is a conflict in your world and you're trying to figure out what to do or how to look at it, you fall back to this priority set or this value hierarchy. And that tells you, remember, you have this number one goal that you're aiming at. And that's how you're supposed to see the world, as a means to attain that goal. Okay, so there's way more information that we can deal with. And in order to deal with that, we have to develop and utilize a value hierarchy. Whatever's at the top of your value hierarchy organizes your perceptions, regulates your emotions, because in order for you to see the world as something that's good or something that's bad, you have to see it first, you have to organize it. And it also enables you to do certain actions. So whatever's at the top of your value hierarchy is super important. Values are very similar to motivations. So talking about the highest value is very similar to talking about the most fundamental motivation. You can think of motivations as sub-personalities. They're spirits in you, for lack of better terms, that pushes you to act in the world in a certain way. So various motivations like fear, play, exploration, temperature regulation, hunger, thirst. These things can be thought of as different dynamic psychobiological systems within you that each have their own specific goal and their own values. So when you're hungry, the hungrier you are, the more the world manifests itself to you as a place to eat. And as the hunger motivation increases and as it rises to the top of your value hierarchy, your environment, both physical and social, organizes itself to you in alignment with that motivation. So if you're hungry, you want to order something to be delivered to you. So you go on Uber Eats. And as you are navigating your phone and you're looking at all of the great food and you order something to come to you, you start to be filled with positive emotion. This form of positive emotion can be considered anticipatory or incentive reward. You have this goal that's set by your highest value or your motivation, in this example of hunger. And as you see yourself getting closer to your goal, so as you see the food on the Uber Eats app getting closer to your home, you get happier. Now, if that order was to get canceled or if the food were to be delivered to the wrong address, you would be filled with negative emotions. So hopefully that makes sense, how your emotions are predicated on your goal that you're currently aiming at. And the goal that you're currently aiming at is dependent on either your highest value or your fundamental motivation. So motivations, values, I'm going to use those terms interchangeably, but they're very important. Now, the question of what is humanity's most fundamental motivation? It's a very important question because, as I just articulated, hopefully, whatever is at the top of your value hierarchy, whatever is your most fundamental motivation, it organizes your perceptions and enables certain actions, and it disables other actions, and it regulates your emotions. And so it's the lens through which you see the world. As we are all trying to navigate our environments and just live in this world and figure out how to behave and how to act and how to think and how to look at things, the fundamental motivation plays a major role in the kinds of attention that we pay to the world. And so this is something deep that manifests within you prior to you thinking about how you're feeling, or you scrolling on social media and seeing certain things and being impacted by all the stimuli. One answer for humanity's fundamental motivation is power. And we can define power as something like the ability to coerce others to involuntarily obey your commands. And I had a friend who said that this was what fundamentally drove human behaviors. And so let's explore that for a little bit. Someone who is fundamentally motivated by power, and let's say power to acquire resources, they will act a certain way. They will see the world a certain way. They will see human interactions as a means to increase their power, to increase their status and wealth and influence. And they will be focused on material gain, generally speaking. This same friend that I was talking about used many examples, such as the different wars that we are currently fighting, the wars that we've fought over many decades and throughout history. And as you look at history, this is what my friend was saying, you can validly conceptualize human history as the fight for power between different groups. These could be racial groups, they could be the two sexes, it could be religious groups, or it could be economic classes. But as you are looking through history, what is self-evident to people who believe that power is the fundamental driver is that there's a constant struggle for either land or resources or wealth, and we live in a relatively zero-sum game, which means that there's always going to be this struggle and there's always going to be this conflict. And again, you could make the argument that it's all about power. Within personality psychology, there are these traits called the dark tetrad personality traits. And so there's psychopathy, which is a lack of empathy, narcissism, which is unearned moral virtue or unearned self-aggrandizement. You have Machiavellianism, which is the tendency to manipulate others, particularly using your words. And then there's sadism, which is taking pleasure in the suffering of other people. From this perspective, all of these sound like power. They sound like traits associated with the application of power to get whatever it is that that individual desires. Now, these personality traits, like all personality traits, evolved for a reason. They have some use. They have some adaptive capacity, maybe in just certain niches, but nevertheless, they have some adaptive capacity. Otherwise, they wouldn't have evolved. And they also evolved in a normal distribution where some people are higher than others, but everyone has the trait. So all of this, hopefully, is just to make a case that power is something that can be helpful, and it is something that people are motivated by as they are dealing with themselves and dealing with each other. The question then becomes, though, is it the fundamental motivation? And I don't think so. I think it's reasonable to say that humans have many motivations, and one source of psychological distress is when there is a conflict between these different motivations. And so psychological health, perhaps, if we could define it, could be something like the balanced harmony between the individual's motivational states such that that individual is also in a harmonious balance with other people. And to the degree that that holds, it's my view that power doesn't sustain itself. It's not iterable. It does not allow for the sustainable expression of the other motivations that we all have. Another motivation, for example, would be play. And this comes from the work of Jaak Panksepp, who's an affective neuroscientist. And play is a deep motivational instinct that all mammals that have been studied have. And Panksepp studied rats primarily, among other animals. And he found this pattern emerge as he paired rats together and let them play. And rats engage in rough and tumble play, much like how dogs play, and much like how humans play when we're wrestling. We like to pin each other and we like to roll around. And so when I say play, that's one of the ways that I'm speaking about it. And so if you take a bigger rat and you take a little rat and you pair them together and have them play repeatedly, if the bigger rat doesn't let the little rat win at least 30% of the time, the smaller rat will stop playing. And now imagine that play is just as much of a motivation as something like thirst or hunger, to where if that motivation does not get satisfied, bad things happen. Now, you might not die the same way that hunger and thirst are essential, but it's still pretty bad. Why else would we have the instinct and the motivation to do it? Given the salience of the motivation of play, rats will engage in what looks like fairness or equality. And so the bigger rat will handicap itself so that way it can let the little rat win some of the time. So that way the little rat will still be entertained and engaged in the play bout. And that way both rats are able to play longer. And so you get this positive sum experience in the social interaction, even just in looking at rats. And then there's another line of evidence against the idea of power. If, when it comes to rats, they don't even engage in power disputes when they're playing, because power disputes would kill the ability to play over the long run. Well, we see the same thing in chimpanzees, and this is from the work of Frans de Waal. Many people think of chimpanzee troops as being headed by the alpha chimp that's the strongest, most aggressive, most tyrannical chimpanzee. And de Waal said that it's actually not the case. That's the case in the minority of times. In the majority of times, the alpha chimp is a smaller chimp who is very good at mediating social conflict, pays attention to the females in the troop, and also pays attention to their babies. And he's also perhaps the most reciprocally altruistic. And so he engages in grooming behaviors and playful behaviors with other chimps, including his rivals. If the chimp is too tyrannical, if you have this domineering brute, it's more likely that that chimp will meet a brutal end as two rival chimps that are tired of being tyrannized against just go and kill him. And so even Frans de Waal noted that there's a sacrificial element that comes to the stable chimp hierarchies and the stable alpha chimps and their ability to sustain a harmonious social organization over a long period of time. So it doesn't seem like power is the way to sustain an engaging and fair and playful social organization or social relationship in rats. It doesn't seem like that's the case in chimps. And it also doesn't seem like that's the case in humans. And after I had that discussion with my friend, I asked many other people, many other friends, in your good relationships in your life, your good relationships with a boss, or maybe you are a manager and you have subordinates underneath you, in your good relationships with, let's say, your spouse or family members or friends, would you characterize those good relationships as being fundamentally driven by power? And across the board, everyone said no. It's often the case that it's the bad relationships that are fundamentally characterized by power struggles and each person trying to dominate the other person. And then even within a singular relationship, let's say if you're married, you can look across the time span and all of the iterated social interactions that you've had, where sometimes they're good and sometimes they're bad. And again, ask the same question. In those good instances within the same relationship, are you each trying to dominate each other and tyrannize each other? Or is it something like it's very playful and you're both laughing and it's engaging and you're learning and you're developing and maybe you're even challenging each other? Because that's the thing about play. Play is not just pleasure as if you had just eaten a big Thanksgiving meal and now you're stuffed and you want to go to sleep. Play is engaging such that it's not too predictable, but it's not too chaotic. It's as if you're playing basketball or playing chess or playing a video game with someone who's just a little bit better than you. And so they're pushing you and it grips your attention. You have to stay focused. And that's the kind of play that is, in my mind, meaningful. And it doesn't mean that it's not associated with negative emotion. Of course, you're probably anxious and you're nervous, but you're also excited and enthusiastic and hopeful. And in my opinion, that is the fundamental driving force behind, let me say, functional human relationships and human behaviors. And to the degree that we as a species are still here and still existing and we're still navigating our social hierarchies and social relationships, I do not think that power is what has enabled us to iterate over the long term. It's something like playful equality or playful sacrifice where each person gives so that the whole can be better. And I think this is true for families. I think this is true for businesses. This was true in my case for the different units where I served in the Marine Corps. And that's not to say that power is not a motivation. Again, human beings have many motivations. The question is, what is the most fundamental? And to try to answer that question, just putting a little spin on it, I think when you look at it from a functional perspective, and functional would be defined as a system that maintains itself across time through various disturbances, the more that a social system is predicated on power, the less functional it is. And I think that that makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. And for me, that's why I would argue that when things are properly oriented, play is what drives us. Self-sacrificial play is what drives us. And when things degenerate and die or get closer to dying, that's when power tends to come up. And so to the degree that things are functional, and from my perspective, looking across our long time span of millions of years where we were chimpanzees just trying to figure out how to not get eaten by snakes and cats, and now we're here and I have YouTube and I have internet and I have all these great things and I can get packages delivered to me the next day and like no one's trying to kill me. To the degree that things are way better than they have been over the course of millions of years, I think that means that we have had to express and embody some sort of functional pattern of interaction in the world so that our social relationships are adaptive. And I don't think that they can be as adaptive as they are if they're predicated on power. Thank you guys for listening. See you in the next one.